I still remember the first time I drove through Whispering Pines Estates. The streets were immaculate. Flowering trees lined the sidewalks in perfect rows. Children played without supervision, their laughter carrying across green lawns. After years of city living, it seemed like the perfect escape, a place where my family could breathe fresh air and feel safe. The real estate agent could not stop talking about the low crime rate and strong community values. She mentioned the homeowners association only briefly. Very active, she said with a practiced smile. I did not think much of it at the time. The moving trucks had barely pulled away when a sharp knock interrupted our unpacking. A woman stood at our door, perfectly styled despite the summer heat, not a hair out of place. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "Welcome to Whispering Pines," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I am Cheryl Harmon, president of the HOA. I wanted to personally deliver your welcome packet." She thrust a 3-inch binder into my hands and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I watched as her eyes scanned our half-unpacked boxes, making mental notes of violations we had not yet committed. "The previous owners were excellent community members," she said, "always followed the rules, never caused problems." The implication hung in the air like a threat. As Cheryl gave me an unsolicited tour of my own house, pointing out where our furniture should go according to neighborhood aesthetics, my eyes caught something through the window. A maintenance crew was installing something at the main entrance. Later that evening, I walked down to investigate. The old electronic gates had been replaced with heavier iron barriers. A thick chain and industrial-grade padlock secured each exit point. A small sign read, "New security measures in effect. Gates locked from 10 p.m. 6 a.m. Martin, my elderly neighbor, approached from his evening walk. "Quite something, is it not?" he said, gesturing toward the gates. "Seems excessive," I replied. "What happens in an emergency?" Martin lowered his voice. "That is what I asked at the last meeting. Cheryl says the fire department has copies of the keys, police too." He did not sound convinced. "And everyone is okay with being locked in at night." Ever since those break-ins last year in the next county over, Cheryl has been on a security crusade. Most folks are too afraid to question her. She has been president for 15 years, controls everything. I frowned at the heavy chain. What about emergencies that cannot wait for someone with a key? Medical issues, fires, natural disasters. Martin shrugged. "Cheryl says nothing bad happens in Whispering Pines, and if you disagree..." He drew a finger across his throat. The following week, I attended my first HOA meeting. The community hall was packed with residents sitting in perfect rows. Cheryl stood at the podium like a general addressing her troops. Behind her, a PowerPoint slide displayed crime statistics, all zeros. "As you can see," she announced with pride, "our security measures are working. 0 break-ins, 0 vandalism, 0 crime of any kind in 24 months. A round of applause followed. I glanced around, noticing how some people clapped with enthusiasm while others did so mechanically, eyes downcast. "Now, we are implementing phase 2 of our safety protocol," Cheryl continued. "All gates will now be chained not just at night, but 24 hours a day. Access will require proper identification and approval." My hand shot up before I could stop myself. The room fell silent. "Yes, our newest resident," Cheryl said, her smile tightening. "I apologize if this has been addressed, but what about emergency evacuations? We are surrounded by woodlands. What if there is a fire?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Cheryl's expression did not change, but her knuckles whitened around the podium. "As I have explained multiple times, Emergency services have keys. Our protocols have been reviewed extensively. Her tone suggested the matter was closed. But what if? Next item, Cheryl interrupted, moving to a slide about lawn maintenance violations. After the meeting, several neighbors avoided eye contact with me. A few others approached with hushed voices, thanking me for speaking up. They shared their own concerns about the chains, but none had been willing to question Cheryl publicly. That night I created a digital folder on my computer. I labeled it HOA Documentation. Inside, I saved photos of the chained gates, copies of the new security policies, and notes from the meeting. Something told me I might need evidence someday. I just did not know how soon that day would come. July arrived with a vengeance. The temperature climbed past 100 degrees for 14 consecutive days. The local news began each broadcast with wildfire updates from neighboring counties. Images of evacuations and charred landscapes filled our screens night after night. I stood in my backyard one evening, watching the sunset through a haze of distant smoke. The air felt wrong, too dry, too still. Dead leaves crackled under my feet, despite our neighborhood's strict watering schedules. The woodlands that had once seemed so charming now loomed as a potential threat. The next morning, I drove to the county fire station. Battalion Chief Rodriguez reviewed the maps I brought showing our chained exits. "This is concerning," he said, frowning at the images. "Have you raised this with your HOA?" "Multiple times," I replied. "They insist emergency services have keys." He shook his head. "We have master keys for standard gates, but these custom locks would require specific keys we might not have on hand. In a rapid evacuation scenario, minutes matter." Armed with this information, I requested an emergency HOA meeting. Cheryl refused initially, but when I mentioned potential liability issues and copied the county fire marshal, she reluctantly agreed. The meeting began with Cheryl standing at the podium, flanked by board members who mirrored her dismissive expression. "Our resident alarmist has requested this unnecessary gathering," she began. "Let me assure everyone that our community is not in a fire risk zone. We are categorized as minimal risk according to assessments from 5 years ago." 5 years ago we had normal rainfall, I countered. "The climate has changed since then. I spoke with the fire department yesterday." "Unauthorized contact with municipal services must go through proper channels," interrupted Gerald, the HOA vice president. I continued despite the interruption. Chief Rodriguez expressed serious concerns about our evacuation capabilities. The chains on our gates could trap us all inside if a fire approaches. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. For the first time, I saw cracks in Cheryl's confident facade. "We have reviewed all safety protocols," she insisted. "The board has unanimously determined our current security measures are appropriate." Sarah Jenkins, a retired nurse who lived next door to me, stood up. "My husband has a heart condition. If ambulances cannot get in quickly—" "They have keys," Cheryl snapped. "But what if we need to get out?" Sarah persisted. "What if evacuation orders come when no emergency personnel are present?" Cheryl's smile returned, cold and practiced. "Sarah, you have always been prone to anxiety. Perhaps you should consider medication for that." The cruel dismissal silenced the room. After the meeting, a small group gathered at my house. Sarah was there, along with Martin and several others. They shared stories of Cheryl's escalating control over the years, residents fined for unapproved flower choices, families ostracized for questioning policies, elderly homeowners pressured until they sold their problematic properties. She will never change the gate policy, Martin said. She would rather risk our lives than admit she made a mistake. That night, I installed a weather scanner and air quality monitor on my roof. The data showed what the HOA refused to acknowledge: humidity levels dropping dangerously low, particulate matter in the air increasing daily, wind patterns shifting toward our community. I tried calling county officials again. Most expressed concern but cited jurisdictional limitations. HOAs had extensive rights to govern their properties. One sympathetic clerk suggested documenting everything for potential future legal action. Future legal action will not help if we are trapped in a firestorm, I said. Walking home from work one evening, I passed Cheryl's house. Through her window, I could see her arguing with someone on the phone. She slammed down the receiver, then noticed me outside. Our eyes met briefly before she yanked her curtains closed. The following morning, I found a violation notice on my door. Apparently, my weather equipment constituted an unapproved exterior modification. The fine was $500, due immediately. I took a photo of the notice and added it to my growing digital folder. The skies above us grew hazier by the day. Local news reported a new fire starting just 20 miles from our community. But inside Whispering Pines, Cheryl maintained her illusion of perfect safety: chained gates, manicured lawns, and absolute control. The emergency alert jolted me awake at 4:47 a.m. A harsh electronic tone followed by an automated voice. Attention! Wildfire alert for southeastern districts. Prepare for possible evacuation. I fumbled for my phone and checked the weather scanner app. The data made my blood run cold. Wind speeds had doubled overnight. Humidity had plummeted to critical levels. The fire that had been 20 miles away yesterday had jumped containment lines during the night. Through my bedroom window, the pre-dawn sky glowed an unnatural orange. I threw on clothes and ran outside. The air smelled wrong, acrid smoke with an undertone of pine. In the distance, a column of dark smoke rose above the tree line. My phone buzzed again. This time, the message was clear: mandatory evacuation order for Whispering Pines and surrounding areas. Proceed immediately to designated evacuation routes. I grabbed my emergency bag and essential documents, then ran to my car. Lights were coming on in houses all along the street. People emerged in various states of dress, faces tight with fear. I started my engine and headed for the main exit, joining a growing line of vehicles. But as we approached the gate, horrified realization spread through the community. The chains were still locked. Thick, unyielding metal links wrapped around our only way out. Thomas Reeves, a former military officer who lived at the end of our street, was already at the gate, pulling at the chains with growing desperation. "It will not budge," he shouted over the sound of car horns. "The lock is industrial grade. We need bolt cutters or a saw." Panic spread quickly. More cars arrived, blocking each other in. Children cried in backseats. An elderly man had what appeared to be a panic attack, clutching his chest as his wife desperately tried to calm him down. I tried calling emergency services. The lines were jammed. Internet service became spotty, then failed entirely. The evacuation order had affected multiple communities, overwhelming all systems. "Try the back entrance," someone suggested. A caravan of vehicles redirected to the secondary exit, only to find it similarly secured. All 3 access points to our community were chained shut. By now, the smoke had thickened significantly. Ash particles floated through the air like gray snow. The temperature was rising despite the early hour, the approaching fire creating its own weather system. Gerald, the HOA vice president, appeared in his bathrobe, looking confused and frightened. "Where is Cheryl?" several people demanded at once. "She has the keys." "I have been trying to reach her," Gerald stammered. "She is not answering." I pulled out my phone and started recording. If we survived this, someone would need to be held accountable. Through my camera lens, I captured the chaos: people screaming, children crying, the locked gate, and beyond it, the clear evacuation route we could not access. Sarah Jenkins approached me, her husband leaning heavily on her arm. "His heart medication is almost out," she whispered. "If we cannot get to a pharmacy soon." A loud engine noise drew our attention. Cheryl's luxury SUV pushed through the crowd, horn blaring imperiously. She emerged looking immaculate as always, not a hair out of place despite the early hour and emergency conditions. "Everyone needs to return to their homes immediately," she announced, as if addressing unruly children. "This evacuation is premature. I have spoken with my contact at the Emergency Management Office." "The fire is coming straight toward us," Thomas shouted, pointing at the visible smoke column. "Open the gates now." Cheryl squared her shoulders. "As HOA president, I am responsible for making informed decisions for our community. The evacuation routes are overcrowded. We are safer remaining in place." "You do not have the authority to override a mandatory evacuation order," I said, still recording. "Open the gates, Cheryl." Her eyes narrowed when she noticed my phone. Recording without consent is against HOA bylaws, and I would remind everyone that damaging HOA property, including our security measures, will result in significant fines and possible legal action. A woman I did not recognize broke down in tears. "My children are in the car. Please just open the gates." Cheryl sipped from her travel mug, seemingly unmoved. "Emergency services will arrive soon with the appropriate keys. Until then, everyone should return home and close all windows. This is simply a precautionary measure." But even as she spoke, a new emergency alert blared from multiple phones simultaneously. "Immediate evacuation. Fire approaching WHISPERING-PINES. All RESID and TS evacuate now." The sky had turned from orange to an apocalyptic red. The smell of smoke was overwhelming. In the distance, we could hear the crackling sound of approaching flames. "Where are the keys, Cheryl?" Thomas demanded, stepping toward her. "At my house in a secure location," she replied, backing away. "And only I have access to them." In that moment, looking at her composed face amid the growing terror around us, I realized the full extent of what her obsession with control had done. She had not just locked gates, she had locked away our ability to save ourselves. And now we were running out of time. By 9 a.m., the situation had deteriorated beyond anyone's worst fears. The temperature soared as the fire approached, creating its own weather system. Ash fell like snow. Breathing became difficult, even with shirts pulled over our faces as makeshift filters. Multiple attempts to contact emergency services confirmed our worst fears. Fire crews were overwhelmed with simultaneous evacuations across the county. Our community was on their list, but they could not provide an estimated arrival time. A group had formed around Thomas, the former military officer who had taken charge of our situation. "We cannot wait any longer," he declared. "We need to break through one of these gates." Several men had already tried using their vehicles as battering rams, but the gates were too sturdy, the chains too thick. We needed tools, and quickly. Cheryl continued to insist this was all an overreaction, but fear had visibly cracked her composure. Her perfect hair hung limp in the heat. Sweat streaked her makeup. Still, she refused to retrieve the keys from her house, claiming it was not necessary yet. From the elevated position of my SUV's roof, I could see the tree line at the western edge of our community. What I witnessed turned my blood cold. The first row of pines had caught fire, flames leaping from tree to tree with terrifying speed. "The fire has reached the community boundary," I shouted down to the others. "Western section, near the Johnsons' house." Panic erupted afresh. Several residents ran toward their homes, desperate to save what they could. Others redoubled their efforts at the gates, pulling at the chains until their hands bled. Martin, my elderly neighbor, approached me with a surprisingly calm expression. "There might be another way," he said quietly. "Years ago, before Cheryl took over, there was a maintenance path behind the old utility shed. It was never officially closed, just forgotten." Hope surged through me. "Can you show me?" Martin nodded. "But we will need to hurry, and we cannot tell everyone at once. It will cause a stampede." We quietly gathered a small group, Sarah and her husband, a family with young children, Thomas, and a few others who had maintained their composure. Martin led us away from the main gates toward the community's eastern border. Behind an overgrown storage shed stood a narrow path, barely visible through years of neglect. A simple chain-link fence marked the property line, with a gate secured by only a simple padlock. This was used by the landscaping crews before the HOA hired their own maintenance staff, Martin explained. Thomas examined the lock. "I can break this with the jack from my truck." As he left to retrieve the tool, I looked back toward the community center. Through the smoky haze, I could see Cheryl standing alone, still clutching her clipboard as chaos unfolded around her. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity. When Thomas returned with the jack, it took only minutes to break the padlock. The old gate swung open with a rusty protest. Beyond it lay a narrow dirt track, not ideal for vehicles but passable in an emergency. "We need to spread the word," I said, "but carefully if everyone rushes here at once." We developed a quick plan. Each of us would return to the main gathering and quietly inform small groups, directing them to the hidden exit in staggered intervals. Vehicles would need to be left behind. The path was too narrow, but people could escape on foot. As I made my way back to the central area, I noticed the fire had advanced with frightening speed. The western homes were now visibly aflame. The heat was becoming unbearable, the air nearly unbreathable. I found Cheryl standing alone by her SUV, her usual confidence shattered. She was coughing violently, her eyes red and streaming from the smoke. "Everyone is gone," she gasped. "They all left their posts. No one is following protocol." Despite everything, I could not leave her there. "Cheryl, we found a way out. You need to come now." She stared at me, confusion mingling with fear. "But the gates, the proper channels." "The gates are still locked," I said. "Your system failed. People are leaving anyway." Her knees buckled, whether from the smoke or the realization that her perfect control had crumbled. I caught her before she hit the ground. "I did everything by the book," she whispered. "Everything was supposed to be perfect." "Sometimes the book is wrong," I replied, pulling her arm over my shoulder. "Now walk." Half carrying, half dragging her, I made my way back to the maintenance path where Thomas was helping organize the evacuation. Already, dozens of residents had made it through, carrying what few possessions they could. As we reached the fence, Cheryl looked back at the community she had ruled with an iron fist. Flames were now visible above multiple roof lines. The perfect paradise was burning. "All my work," she murmured. "Move," I said, pushing her forward through the gate. "Your work nearly killed us all." 3 days passed before authorities allowed residents to return to Whispering Pines. The damage was extensive but uneven. The western section had burned almost completely, 12 homes reduced to charred frames and ash. The central area suffered smoke damage but remained largely intact. The eastern section, where the fire had been contained just in time, escaped with minimal impact. News vans lined the community entrance, which now stood permanently open. The chains had been cut by firefighters who arrived hours after most residents had escaped through the maintenance path. In what some are calling a miracle, no fatalities have been reported from the Whispering Pines community, a reporter announced into a camera. However, questions are being raised about why residents were unable to evacuate through the main gates. I watched from a distance as Cheryl was interviewed. She had recovered her composure, styled her hair, and applied fresh makeup. The transformation was remarkable. To anyone who had not witnessed her breakdown, she would appear perfectly in control. "Our community had a comprehensive emergency plan," she told the reporter. "While the situation was certainly challenging, our residents remained calm and orderly. The gates were a security measure that had been approved by all relevant authorities." My blood boiled at the blatant lies. I approached the news crew, phone in hand. "I have video showing exactly what happened," I said. "The gates were chained on Cheryl's orders. The evacuation plan failed completely." The reporter's eyes widened. "Are you willing to share that footage?" "Absolutely." That evening, my videos appeared on the local news. By morning, they had gone viral nationwide. The images were undeniable: chained gates, trapped residents, Cheryl refusing to retrieve the keys, the panic as fire approached, and finally, residents fleeing through an overgrown path while flames engulfed their homes. Cheryl issued a statement claiming the footage was taken out of context and that she had acted in the community's best interest at all times. Few believed her. 3 days later, a town hall meeting was called at the local high school. The room was packed with Whispering Pines residents, county officials, fire department representatives, and media. County Commissioner Davis opened the meeting. "We are investigating serious allegations regarding the evacuation procedures at Whispering Pines Estates. Our primary concern is ensuring such a dangerous situation never occurs again." Fire Chief Rodriguez spoke next. "My department had no knowledge that exit gates were being chained shut. No keys were provided to us, despite claims to the contrary. Had our crews not been delayed by multiple simultaneous emergencies, we would have discovered this dangerous violation sooner." When my turn came to speak, I played additional footage I had not yet shared publicly. Cheryl at multiple HOA meetings dismissing safety concerns, insisting that gates remain chained despite warnings. "This was not a one-time mistake," I concluded. "This was a pattern of prioritizing control over safety. It nearly cost lives." Sarah Jenkins spoke about her husband's medical distress during the evacuation. Martin described how the community had once had proper emergency protocols before Cheryl systematically dismantled them. One by one, residents shared their experiences of that terrifying day. Throughout it all, Cheryl sat rigid in the front row, occasionally shaking her head or whispering to her attorney. When finally called to respond, she approached the microphone with her chin high. "As HOA president for 15 years, I have maintained an impeccable record of community management," she began. "The recent wildfire was an unprecedented event that no one could have anticipated." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the audience. The evacuation challenges were unfortunate but unavoidable given the circumstances. I maintain that all decisions were made in accordance with established guidelines. Guidelines you created, Thomas called out from the audience. Guidelines the community approved, Cheryl countered, her voice sharp. Because you bullied anyone who disagreed, another resident shouted. The meeting deteriorated from there. Commissioner Davis eventually had to call for order. In light of these serious concerns, the county will be conducting a formal investigation into Whispering Pines' HOA governance and safety protocols, he announced. In the meantime, we are issuing an emergency order prohibiting any gates in the community from being locked or chained in any manner. As the meeting adjourned, a law firm representative approached me and several other residents. We believe you have grounds for a class action lawsuit against both the HOA and its officers personally, he explained. Would you be interested in discussing this further? Looking at Cheryl's retreating back as she hurried from the hall, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, I felt a grim satisfaction. Yes, I replied. I think that discussion is long overdue. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after the fire. The community center still smelled of smoke, a fitting backdrop for what was about to unfold. Attendance was nearly perfect. Every homeowner who could physically attend was present, anger and determination evident on their faces. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Gerald, the vice president who had always followed Cheryl's lead, called the meeting to order. Cheryl sat beside him, her expression carefully neutral. Her attorney flanked her other side, briefcase open on his lap. The first item on our agenda, Gerald began nervously, is a motion for a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president. Cheryl visibly stiffened. This had clearly not been on the agenda she approved. Before we proceed with this unauthorized motion, her attorney interjected, I must advise that any actions taken tonight could impact pending investigations and potential litigation. Thomas stood up. Is that a threat? It is a legal observation, the attorney replied smoothly. Martin, who rarely spoke at meetings, rose shakily to his feet. I have lived in this community for 27 years. I have seen 5 HOA presidents come and go, but I have never seen one who placed their own power above the safety of residents. He unfolded a piece of paper. I have here a petition signed by 78% of homeowners demanding the immediate removal of Cheryl Harmon from her position as HOA president. Cheryl's composure cracked slightly. This is procedurally improper. Removal requires. Article 7, Section 3 of our bylaws, interrupted Sarah Jenkins, states that an emergency removal can be conducted with a 2/3 majority vote when questions of public safety arise. I wrote those bylaws, Cheryl snapped. That section was intended for situations where a board member becomes incapacitated. Like mentally incapacitated, someone called from the back. Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the room. Gerald cleared his throat. We will proceed with the vote. All in favor of removing Cheryl Harmon from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. The forest of raised hands was overwhelming. Only Cheryl, her attorney, and 2 longtime board members kept their hands down. Motion carries, Gerald announced, unable to meet Cheryl's eyes. Cheryl Harmon is removed from the position of HOA president, effective immediately. Cheryl stood abruptly. This is not the end of this matter. The HOA has insurance that will cover any frivolous lawsuits. My record speaks for itself. Your record nearly got us killed, I responded, loud enough for everyone to hear. She gathered her belongings with trembling hands and marched out, her attorney hurrying after her. The room erupted in applause as the door closed behind them. The following weeks brought a cascade of consequences. The county investigation uncovered numerous safety violations beyond the chained gates, building permits that had been falsified, fire inspections that had never actually occurred, maintenance funds that had been redirected to aesthetic improvements rather than structural safety. One by one, board members resigned rather than face potential personal liability. The class action lawsuit moved forward, with nearly 60 families signing on as plaintiffs. The media coverage continued. Local news gave way to national attention. A popular news magazine ran a feature titled "Locked In: How HOA Tyranny Nearly Led to Tragedy." Cheryl's face appeared on screens across the country, always accompanied by images of the chained gates and burning homes. The professional consequences for her were swift. The real estate firm where she worked as a senior agent terminated her employment, citing reputational concerns. The Chamber of Commerce removed her from their board of directors. Her carefully constructed persona as a community leader crumbled. Then came the criminal charges. The district attorney's office, under pressure from public outrage, filed charges of criminal negligence and reckless endangerment. The image of Cheryl being escorted from her home by officers, no makeup, hair disheveled, made the front page of local papers. I received a call from a producer at a national morning show, requesting an interview about the incident. Initially reluctant, I eventually agreed when they offered to host a community panel rather than focus solely on me. The day of the broadcast, 5 of us sat under bright studio lights: myself, Martin, Sarah, Thomas, and a mother whose home had burned completely. We shared our experiences calmly and factually, describing not just the fire but the years of increasingly oppressive HOA control that preceded it. "What would you want other homeowners to learn from your experience?" the host asked. I considered the question carefully. Rules matter, safety protocols matter, but blind obedience to authority can be dangerous. Sometimes, the most responsible thing you can do is question the rules, especially when those rules put lives at risk. Spring arrived in Whispering Pines with an explosion of new growth. Green shoots pushed through blackened soil in the western section. Construction crews worked steadily, rebuilding homes that had been lost. The community looked different now, less uniform, more individual, as homeowners made their own choices rather than following rigid HOA guidelines. The gates stood permanently open, their locking mechanisms removed entirely. A local artist had been commissioned to transform the main entrance. Where once had hung chains and padlocks, now stretched a mural depicting phoenix birds rising from flames. Beneath it, a small plaque read simply, "Never Again." The new HOA president, Alina Chen, had been elected in a community-wide vote, the first truly democratic election in the association's history. A retired civil engineer, Alina approached her role with transparency and humility. "We are here to maintain common areas and facilitate community decisions," she explained at her first meeting, "not to dictate how people live." The lawsuit against the former HOA leadership had been settled out of court. The insurance company, after reviewing the evidence, had declined to cover Cheryl's legal costs, citing willful negligence. The settlement provided funds for rebuilding and compensated residents for their losses. Cheryl herself had moved away shortly after her criminal case concluded with a guilty plea to reduce charges. Her sentence included community service, a suspended jail term, and a prohibition against serving in any HOA or similar authority position. Last I heard, She had relocated to another state, leaving no forwarding address. On the anniversary of the fire, Elena organized a community gathering. Not a celebration, too much had been lost for that, but a commemoration, a chance to reflect on what had happened and what had changed. Tables lined the community park. Children played on newly installed equipment. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now greeted each other warmly. The atmosphere was relaxed, the conversations genuine. "They want you to join the board," Martin said, approaching me with a plate of food. "Elena mentioned it yesterday." I shook my head. Not interested. I did what needed doing, but I am not cut out for community politics. Martin nodded. Some fight the battles, others rebuild afterward. Both are necessary. We walked together toward the memorial garden that had been planted where the maintenance shed once stood. The path that had saved so many lives had been widened and paved. Now, an official secondary exit prominently marked on community maps. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not spoken up?" Martin asked. "If you had just gone along like the rest of us did for years?" The question gave me pause. I think eventually someone would have challenged her. I just hope it would not have taken a disaster to make it happen. Sarah Jenkins joined us, her husband walking steadily beside her with a new medication regimen that had improved his condition significantly. "The emergency drill went well yesterday," she reported. "Everyone knew exactly what to do and where to go." Elena had instituted monthly emergency preparedness drills. What had once been seen as an inconvenience was now embraced as essential. The community had learned its lesson at terrible cost. As evening approached, I walked alone to the main entrance. The gates stood open, silhouetted against the sunset. Beyond them, the evacuation route was clearly marked with reflective signs. The county had installed new lighting along the entire path, ensuring it would be visible even in heavy smoke. I paused at the threshold, 1 foot inside our community, 1 foot on the public road beyond. The boundary that had once trapped us now existed only as a symbol. In reality, we were connected to the world around us, not isolated from it. A family walked past me toward the park, nodding and greeting. New residents who had bought one of the rebuilt homes. They knew the community's story, everyone did now. It had become part of the sales disclosure, a cautionary tale about what happens when security becomes a prison. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked back at the homes nestled among trees both burned and new. We had survived not just a wildfire but a more insidious threat, the danger of surrendering our judgment to someone who claimed to know better. The chains that had nearly killed us were as much mental as physical. I stepped fully onto the public road, then back into our community. Back and forth, freely crossing a boundary that no one could lock again. Sometimes the most dangerous prisons are the ones we accept without question. And sometimes the only way out is through the fire.